I never intended to review fan content in this community, nor was I looking forward to it. This is because fan content is based on a particular viewpoint that not everyone else can agree upon, unless it's canonized. But even on that scale, I just found it way too awkward in reviewing them. On the contrary though, you can't deny the amount of talent that is involved here, and that's something to take into strong consideration as far as contributing for the show goes. Additionally, there have been animation projects coming underway, and I found it to be the possible highlight of this year as what music was last year. Since the show itself is on another hiatus until winter, it's come to my attention that I should be open to this. This is a chance for them to improve on with whatever critiquing skills I can offer, and hopefully it's this chance for a career goal they can pursue on for any acknowledgement they can get. So with not much else to disclose, Snowdrop is the first one to run down the line. Taking place over 1,000 years ago, no pony has any admiration for winter. The weather's aggressive and civilization in Cloudsdale is extremely miserable up there with severe blizzards that come occasionally.
Wherever it is, they need to hurry up and go get the front. It's freezing.
They couldn't produce the rain yet, even if they were back with the weather system. The land still needs time to rest. That's the only reason we create winter, to help rejuvenate the soil for the earth ponies below.
Well, I'm sick of waiting.
You won't have to wait much longer. The spring sunrise is only 2 days away. Then you won't have to see a speck of snow for a whole year.
What follows this is a blind Pegasus filly named Snowdrop, hence the title, who deals with an internal struggle in herself and having a school project that's weighing over her shoulders. The school projects are important like no other. Since it's the 100th year for the disclosure of winter, the students are to team up together and present their special projects to the Alicorn sisters in respect to the century of the celebration. Snowdrop has no companion, unfortunately, and she chooses to rely on herself. However, Snowdrop lies on a cloud overnight, fearing and doubting herself through her own self-identity. She feels she isn't useful or has anything special to offer to anyone. But through her own self-discoveries, she learns more positively and exploits on it.
Snow is...
You listen better than any pony I know.
Tell me more about the stars.
Well, there are all sorts of stars, all different shapes and sizes. But they all have little points at their edges.
Even though it's taken place on one spot throughout the majority of the story, there's a lot that takes into effect on so many levels. This is a story about making a positive viewpoint that's negative. It's particularly a plot thread that's very familiar. Now saying this, I don't mean to address it as a flaw. Going into further depth, instead of having a character who's different and is lectured by everyone else, she proactively thinks more to herself. Most stories like Rudolph involved exploring through how everyone else is an outcast, and he had to know that he wasn't alone. Snowdrop didn't need any of this. She found a way to count her blessings and bring those blessings forth to herself, and that makes a more powerful approach. Now, many viewers have stated that they've been teary-eyed over Snowdrop and the issues that she had to face. But to be completely honest, while Snowdrop is an emotionally well-driven character, I didn't get this emotional. In fact, what bothered me was how desperate it was for that. In explaining so, the other school kids were neglecting her for the addition of their school projects. Given that she's blind, which is a physical disability, it's pretty far-fetched and way too unfair that the other kids would literally treat her this abnormally. When I was in the 4th grade, there was a paraplegic student and we respected him for who he was. We never laughed, teased, or neglected him for anything. And this comes from someone who used to have outbursts and temper tantrums in the classroom. It also didn't help that Ms. Windith wasn't defending her when seeing the other students debate behind Snowdrop's back on who to have on their team. Much to her credit though, she at least offered other options for Snowdrop and even tried excusing her from the ceremony to avoid any pressure on that poor filly.
Are you sure you'll be ready? Working by yourself can't be easy. I can still place you in another group. You'll get credit.
Oh, no. I have something really good planned, Miss Windith. You'll see. But, it has to be a surprise. It has to.
On the other hand, what I did get a strong sense of was her own self-identity alone. Even more so, it built a connection between her and Princess Luna. The fact that Luna was known for raising the moon and covering the night sky indicated a literal display of darkness. Snowdrop shares a similarity from her blindness as far as the darkness goes. This once again turns a negative into a positive and makes it a blessing. Night and winter are both cold and darkness. These two terms are often taken negatively. But to a strong benefit, there's a sense of wonder with the stars at night and a sense of calm breeze for the winter. So the bonding of these two comes very naturally. Nearing to the end of the cartoon, it shows a deeper impact for Luna as 1,000 years passed on, and Snowdrop is no longer around. If there's anything tear-worthy, Luna's connection with her would be the answer. Unfortunately, their connections are talked about a little too late. Nonetheless, it did what was needed and ending it on a strong note. Narrowing everything else down, this is a nice and pretty insightful short. The script may have had room for improvement, but it does what it needs to do in order to tell a story. And when it hits its mark, it hits its mark. The animation is solid, smooth, and the color scheme was well crafted for the mood it was set for. The music is also very wonderful to hear. It's calm and collective, bringing out that cold sense of atmosphere in many tones that it's provided. Some are cold and depressing, and some are cold and cheery. I also want to address that the voice work is worth giving credit to since there have been kids involved. It's not easy bringing out that child voice, and that's a big task for them to handle. Meredith Sims, who's known for Emma88 on YouTube, did a great job as Snowdrop with that child voice she provided. Of course, the same can be said for many other vocalists providing the child voice. All in all, this was a very well constructed project, and I hope to see more. To the team on Silly Philly Studios, well done. Double Rainboom was the long-awaited first ever fan-made episode by Zachary Rich. And boy does it show. Online jokes and references, shipping chemistries of Lyra and Bon Bon, and even Derpy and Dr. Hoops, which I feel satisfy the fans of Bald Dumbo Rat. And as if that wasn't enough, something bigger comes along the way. I mean, holy Celestia, it was everything a fan could have so much fun with. And it's no surprise when I say that upon its release, it knocked the ball out of the frickin' park. Bronies went nuts over this, hype was just everywhere. And it's pretty much what almost every fan could ask for. But when narrowing everything down, it's really just a flawed episode. And it just gets so overwhelming every time I think about it. The episode begins with Rainbow Dash visiting Twilight in her lab as she's in the process of developing a potion, which if done right is an enhancement to anyone's natural abilities. To Dash's results, it would strengthen her speeding abilities, and much more, which gets her really ecstatic on trying it out. So of course, without permission, she drinks the potion behind Twilight's back. After a quick analysis for any side effects, which by the way is an important plot point, she takes off, speeding through Ponyville like crazy, and then dares to do a double Rainboom, hence the title. But after doing so, it creates a blast so big, it nearly devastates all of Ponyville. And somehow, Rainbow creates a vortex that leads her to a different dimension. Cartoon Network. Specifically, she runs into the universe of the Powerpuff Girls.
The city of Townsville is under attack!
After a little tour through, Dash gets caught up in a goose chase by the girls, since they want to keep her as a pet. The potion then wears off, unfortunately, due to its side effects, which Twilight was testing her for.
This is what you get for not thinking ahead! Oh no! The potion! It must have worn off!
Miraculously though, Dash is rescued by Pinkie Pie by breaking the fourth wall, as a condition of Twilight's potion that she redeveloped another capsule of. The moral behind the episode was to think ahead and ask before using anyone's belongings. To its credit, that's something worth addressing since it is an important lesson to anyone. I'm going to start with the flaws immediately because they're the first thing that comes to mind. To begin with, while it was nice to have online jokes here, they've been very distracting. Hell, half the time it consumed too much of the episode during many sequences. They were stretching out unevenly and making the pacing a big issue. One example is with Derpy and a few plants that fell on her and destroying her muffin. It's cute, but this went on for way too long during Dash's speed sequence. I get the idea that a few jokes from the fan's perspective could be in use, but it could be put to better timing. I was also confused with the troll face and the smoke during the progress of making the enhancement potion. I say that because I actually had the impression that the potion may have been fatal due to its evil laugh. It also didn't help that Dash and Twilight were questioning on how dangerous it was after they just saw that. Just overall, in shortcomings, it's way too clustered, and this could have been done better with all this. My biggest issue was that it was turned into a crossover. This is also very distracting to what's going on throughout the episode. Now, I don't mean to say that it was unnecessary. I personally enjoyed the scene when Dash entered the Powerpuff Girls universe, but at the same time, it almost felt like a different story. Crossing over different franchises isn't a bad idea, but there's a way to do it in a timely fashion. Now, it is obvious that it's a nod to Lauren Faust and Craig McCracken since he was the creator of the series, but what would have been more effective was this. Dash crosses over other franchises while the Powerpuff Girls are chasing her, but specifically titles like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends or Milky Way Galaxy Girls. This to me is a bigger nod, and it's also a grander sense of adventure. It also adds more to the potion effects, which is also the result of more Rainbooms. I can already sense a Nyan Cat reference along the way. Yeah, sure, it would have taken a lot more effort and time, but once again, I address that the memes and references could have been cropped down during the speed sequence in Ponyville, and have room for this concept. Even if it was shortened down to a minute or even a few seconds during the chase sequence, I still would have been satisfied. Additionally, this could have also solved the issues with the pacing and what other viewers were anticipating to see. With all the shortcomings out of the way, it's still a very enjoyable episode. This is what any fan would want when making an episode and how it's seen on a general basis. It's something in which I think the creator has had a lot of fun with. It's a little too much fun though. As I addressed earlier, there's so much room for improvement. On a general standpoint, it's certainly a lot of fun, but to a critical, it's a mess. Nonetheless, it was well animated, well expressive, the music was enjoyable. This also goes out to setting up the Powerpuff Girls with the characters and environment as well. Even though I wasn't fond of the show when I was a kid, it's still worth giving credit to. It's also worth giving credit to the voice work. Ellie Monty, Meredith Sims, Mina Chan, and many more. Gee, doesn't she ever get tired of voicing Twilight? So concluding this, I say to Zachary Rich, while I may have been critical, I still have enjoyed what you made and given us. You spent a lot of time and effort and dedication on this project, and I respect that. I wish you the best and improve over time, because that's what we all strive for. Kudos and well done. As the Brony fandom began to spread, there's been a wide variety of resources that in many cases define the culture in the hopes that the Bronies can be perceived in a more positive outlook. Unfortunately, they've been heavily misunderstood, and even worse, assumed to the deep end of antagonism, no thanks to many mainstream medias. But disregarding that, some documentaries were in the works, and so far the latest, and perhaps in my opinion the most successful so far, is the Brony Chronicles. The Brony Chronicles is a 3-part documentary series that was assembled and produced by Stephen Carver and Joshua Tyson, formerly referred to as Saberspark and Paleo Steno. For those new to the fandom thus far, Saberspark has been iconic for Ballad of the Brony, an hour-long school project he presented which told the information on the fandom during his major in political science. Paleo Steno has been previously known for MLP video logging, episodic reviews of Season 2, and eventually a 45-minute video explaining the details and values of the show itself. At the start of 2012, the both have agreed and started producing this project, beginning with BronyCon over the summer. The first part of this documentary follows the historical background of the following: the fandom, the My Little Pony franchise entirely, and even the history of Hasbro itself. Many Bronies are interviewed along the way, explaining their side and discoveries of the show. AC Racebest, Your Enigma, Shira Point, D-Notive, Brony Curious, Dusty Cat, and many more, including Hot Diggity Demon, who's mostly recognized for his MOV series. What makes this documentary a lot more effective, unfortunately leads me into having to spoil it in order to determine my point across. To begin with, Hasbro's history points out and addresses their toy campaign, as it has placed us under a mindset of separating ourselves by our genders.
This is what we call the pink-blue syndrome, and it has been highly prominent in the My Little Pony series since its creation, and is also the main reason why bronies are such an unusual phenomenon. Go to any toy aisle at any store. What colors jump out to you? Pink and blue, of course. And what do these colors indicate? The boy toys from the girl toys. The guys will stand around their aisle checking out Star Wars toys, Nerf guns, and Hot Wheel cars. The female section, on the other hand, will be filled with Barbie dolls, Littlest Pet Shop, and My Little Pony. This is something people in modern society are used to, but rarely consciously realize.
This was a mindset that's been around for many years, and because of that, this also explains the target demographics of each shows. This also explains the rebellious side of the fandom. As some of us may recall, some shows that were based on toys have been mostly a product placement over time throughout the 80s. G.I. Joe, Transformers, Gem, GoBots, He-Man, and the Masters of the Universe. These were separated into demographics by genders regardless of whatever the quality was the shows had in its time. To this day, this still continues. As shown through another example was the history of its past generations. The first generation began to start under some TV specials during the early 80s, then a movie, and then the series, appealing to young girls. After a long stretch of the franchise before Friendship is Magic, they reached the dead end of just trying to appeal to younger demographic. With FIM, it was shown that statistics and focus groups aren't the matter of appeal. In addition, unlike most fan videos that have spoofed the previous generations most people seem to have negated, the documentary has kept itself to a very fair degree. The last thing to give credit where credit is due is the birth of the fandom itself out of 4chan. 4chan has been known to be a very infamous website for a wide variety of reasons that only talking about them would open a fresh can of worms. But the reason why I give credit here is mostly because most documentaries regarding the fandom has been hiding from this, with the exception of Ballad of the Brony and the Know Your Memes video analysis. Let's face it, we are not a perfect fandom. We have flaws, we have issues, and we have encountered some personal dilemmas in the past. We've had internet drama through Tumblr, some internet forums, and DeviantArt. We've had some hard times at Everfree Northwest, and let's not forget the disastrous results with Las Pegasus Unicon. Hiding from it does not make the fandom any better. Glorifying the fandom and forcefully making it positive doesn't always work either. It's an aspect of hiding from your fears and your problems. If you learn and face and admit your mistake, you can learn from it and improve yourself. And you know what? That's what this fandom has for a long time. And that's what makes the fandom stronger. Wow, I got a little carried away right there. It's only until later on I can further analyze and deliver my 2 cents on the progress of the Brony Chronicles. But until then, I can't guarantee any final results. I will say, however, I'm very optimistic about it, and there's a lot that I can appreciate in what both Saberspark and Paleo has given us. I know it isn't fair to compare this to other documentaries, but I've learned so much from this one by far. The sooner the other two are finished, the better. To Saberspark and Paleo Steno, well done. I remember last year seeing the teaser for Children of the Night, and needless to say, nearly shitting myself in the shock of the awe and wonder. And who wouldn't? I knew the fandom had so much creativity and heart in their effort, but this was beyond that level. It was a Disney-esque animation while accurately rooting down to the art style of the show in rich and vibrant colors. Given how much effort was put into this, it was quite obvious that this project was going to take a while before its completion. But out of all the fan works that were put in production, this honestly was the one I was looking forward to the most. And with much weight, it has finally paid off. I should add that this is a music video, and the video itself is approximately 4.5 minutes long. All other fan works I've reviewed so far have been at least 15 minutes or so. So for anyone behind this project and is watching this, please excuse me if I make this review longer than the video itself. There's quite an interesting amount of detail to go over. Children of the Night was animated by 2 artists, Richard Lionheart-Surois and Jordana Spirit Gonzalez. It features a song performed by Kate Eroton Covington entitled Come Little Children, which was a musical cover of the same name from the infamous Disney flick Hocus Pocus. In further historical detail, it was once a poem written by Edgar Allan Poe. As the song was originally portrayed as a hypnotic call on the movie, it was utilized to represent a form of positive escapism to the viewers. What's followed is a premise about a rebellious formation where Luna is provided some company by her comrade Ponies of her Night. Fearing that the land would split, the formation was declined by Celestia, and thus it was taken into secrecy.
No pony knows that we are still here, smiling beneath the moonlight while remembering our dear mother. For we will forever be her children of the night.
As the video shows, the foster and the homeless children are taken into flight of their life as they're taken away by Luna over the skies. It's only at this point I can understand the concept, but there were some portions that were left a little underexplained. Because of this, there's a strong possibility that it could leave a wrongful impression to the narrative portion for anyone who watches this neutrally. On an FAQ page on their blog, 2 last questions were of concern in the following. What will happen to the children? And is she dropping them to their death? Is she taking their souls? Given that the lyrics have had a negative impression before this, it's pretty natural to think of it this way. However, the 2 artists have responded to these following questions. Responding to the 7th question, you will find out in good time. Isn't it more fun to find out by yourselves than asking for a spoiler? And the 8th question, that is not the story I am telling, but I believe that anyone can interpret it as they want to, whatever you like best. With the addition of the OC character designs, my guess would be that there would be a series or a story later on within the Phillies and the time period of Luna and Celestia's early years of Equestria. At the same time, it's come to a subjective perspective that leads us to decide however we feel about Luna's intentions. In my opinion, I only see Luna doing the favor for the homeless and foster children. While they're taken away, it's highly probable that she'll take them into her custody to grow her formation. This could also explain more behind the opening scene when Gari was writing her journal in a dark cave. While I have said it could be obvious according to what's on screen, I wouldn't want to jump to conclusions and imply that's what the intended narrative was. I can only find out sooner or later to have loose ends tied, or just believe it that way. The last thing I'd want to do is misrepresent the project to the viewers and insult the animators. Disregarding any misguidances, the animation is what's been said already, but the scenery, the color scheme, and the overall atmosphere is just gorgeous to lay eyes upon. There's more to good animation than just the animation alone, and it clearly shows. The music is a very solid inclusion and supportive choice for its visual appeal, bringing out that calm, relaxing feeling and having that great sense of escapism later on. To these 2 artists, I think this may be my favorite fan work so far. I look forward to your next project, Heaven's Light, which was in an earlier production prior. Kudos, and well done. There's been quite a lot of background ponies that have been given some names by the fandom as well as the staff had names of their very own, each of which have had theories of what their personality traits are, what relationships are carried out, and what potential stories are laid down within fanfiction. So it isn't too much of a surprise to me when something like Button's Adventures is taken into the major role of animation. Not just that, but by Italian animator Jan Animations, who's known to animate just as accurately as the show.
Yes!
Ah, who was that?
Sup?
I love Kim Possible a lot. How the hell did you get here?
I'm not really sure. One minute I'm standing around, minding my own business, and next I'm somehow here. Plus I'm known for breaking the fourth wall from time to time. Have you been paying any attention?
Wait, you too? I thought the voice of reason was able to do that.
So, you were talking about Button's adventures?
Yep, I'll might as well have you review it with me since now you're here. Very well then. Button's Adventures is based on a character that was briefly seen on the episode Hearts and Hooves as he was playing an arcade game. This indicated that technology actually existed in the fantasy realm of candy-colored ponies. Other animated projects I've critiqued previously have had a narrative of some kind, but this project doesn't necessarily have one. Instead, it's a set of 7 consecutive humorous scenes overlaying the daily activities of Button and his mother. At times he plays with his toys or video games, and other times are just intended antics that later get him into trouble. The humor plays down the lines of slapstick and cartoon humor. While it is considered immature and relentless to some viewers, it's presented very well with every scene leaving a good smile on my face. What makes the humor work is how Button is identified. The many skits that involve Button's actions are pretty relatable to us a lot when we were young. Even though everything he's done in his skits have been considered either ignorant or moronic, Button's just a kid who just doesn't know any better. A lot of us have been involved in these situations a lot. Some of us were naive, competitive, and just stubborn to learn from our expenses. And let's not forget that a lot of us had developed bad sleeping habits out of our passion for video games we've gotten into trouble for. That's basically what Button is narrowed down to, and I love that.
Agreed. Button's antics set the stage for a character who has many everyday problems, making him relatable and grounded. The situations he gets himself in throughout the episode are not only enjoyable, but really illustrate that point.
Button's mom is so far my favorite character in this short.
Psh, yeah, figures.
What?
Oh, nothing.
KP, you interrupted me for a reason. What was it?
You just like her because she's attractive, don't you?
No.
Yeah, sure. You're really fooling me. Nice bluff. Typical stallion.
Oh, come on, it's not like you have a crush on a villain who ravages chaos with the lion's paw and a deer's leg.
That's different. I don't like Discord like that. That's nasty.
Fine. I suppose I should go over this topic before anything else gets completely out of hand. Ever since the release, there's been an unfortunate controversy online about Button's mom. Many viewers have grown to admire the design of her so much that there's already been some inappropriate artwork posted on various websites, more specifically Tumblr. Now, I can understand why on some level, and I'm not going to lie. Yeah, Button's mom is very beautifully designed thanks to Berry Sweet. Her elegant, slender body, the hair, the blue eyes, and the soft voice that she uses when talking to Button. But do you want to know who's also attractive? Megan Fox and Mila Jovovich. What they share in common is simple. They're cardboard cutouts. Megan's character in Transformers did nothing but be a forced love interest, and Mila's a Mary Sue in a series that has nothing to do with the video game counterparts it's supposed to be based on.
Jesus Christ, can we move on?
Right, the point I'm trying to get at is that just because a character is attractive does not mean that's what I like about the character. I focus more on the traits and personalities, not the visual appeal.
Sure you do, but please, continue.
I was about to. Although she has smaller screen time than Button does, she stands out more dimensional to me than most other parental character cartoons have in the past. Most parental characters I've seen have been stereotypically either brainless or taken advantage of by their offsprings. Other times I've seen them as soccer moms who are uptight and mindlessly overprotective, representing an unlikable cliche. The parental characters I've seen that were done right to me were the ones who were interactive and understandable to their loved ones, but knowing when to take steps when raising kids. This was established in titles, however, that took more stories more seriously and not comedically, such as Avatar: The Last Airbender. In Button's Adventures, Button's mom breaks out of that formality several times throughout the skits. She does her motherly duties, like cook and clean and keep a lookout for Button, but out of his relentlessness, she is very well aware of everything. In fact, that last skit had me in stitches. The fact that she was able to get back to Button for mouthing her off in a different language was very clever. Even more so, she didn't have to yell at him for that. Just a smile and an attempt to ground him. Interestingly enough, I'd like to know her gaming history, given that she's known the language. Unfortunately, if there's anything to address, I was able to notice very quickly that the voice actress Ellie Monty had a bit of her English accent showing in some areas.
You must take better care of your things when you put them down. I nearly fell over this morning.
I know it's difficult to switch her accent from a British accent to an American descent, but these lines were way too noticeable.
Okay, fair enough. And now it's my turn to gush. Share my thoughts about this short. The animation was great as expected, but I didn't think the humor was going to be as meme-tastic and funny too. Yes, mean-tastic is a word now. Deal with it.
First, you have the yes pancakes joke, which died very quickly, and now you have mean-tastic. Any other running gags you're trying to conjure up?
What can I say? I keep them coming.
Okay. But yes, KP has a point. This cartoon has already gained a few online memes, one of which was based on the first skit where Button finds a peel-off message on his apple juice box. Ever since then, people photoshopped that message several times indicating whatever the subject matter was at hand. Other times, people like to joke around with a mustache at the scene where Button was getting back his Joy Boy. This already brings me to something else I'm intrigued from, the gaming console designs and how the ponies played with them by the use of their hooves. Despite any use of magic by unicorns and alicorns, I saw the Button was switching one of his hooves back and forth on a game controller, and one of the handhelds carried control buttons on the sides. Nice to see that Jan expanded the thought of what games ponies play. Oh god, I said a painful pun, didn't I?
It's, magic, I guess. Anyway, as a big fan of animation I am, I'm just glad the animation wasn't wasted on subpar and flat jokes, which is always a shame. Plus, Button is just adorable. Did you not see that spinny hat thing he's got? Adorable! Dude, this was fantastic. From the characters, to the side gags, to the everything. Hope we get more, that's all I'll say.
It's only a matter of time before we find out if Jan ever plans to continue. I'm positive he will, considering how well received the first episode has. I guess the episodes will follow another set of individual skits, which could be about his experience in school and his interactions with other students. Or he just won't care and try to find a way to get back home to his video games. We also might know more about his family, but who knows. To Jan, there isn't much that hasn't been said already. I love your work and the valiant effort you provide in this fandom. I hope to see more in the works from you. Take your time with the projects, especially since some viewers need to learn to be patient. Kudos, and well...
Hey, what's this?
Nothing.
Ha! I knew it! I knew you were creepy. How can you have this?
Really?
You
It's back to that
she's
static
married,
again?
right?
You know there are people out
I
there who
knew
are
you
far
were
worse than
creepy.
me, right?
I
And
knew
you're
you
putting
were
me under the
creepy.
fault of all of this?
I knew
How
you were
dare you? Among the first season, Sonic Rainboom was one of the first biggest moments in the show that has become not only memorable itself, but to the fandom. It's gained several online memes such as Fluttershy's Yay, Rarity's Laughter, and of course, well, the Rainboom itself. It's been enlisted as having one of the most iconic moments in the show and highly favored by the fandom. And it's with good reason that it's also become one of my favorite episodes of Season 1. The morality of its story lies within the realms of narcissism and the conflict of stage fright. As the episode begins, Dash is practicing her stunts for the Flyers competition being held on Cloudsdale, a city literally made of clouds as it's populated by only Pegasi. One of her stunts involves the Sonic Rainboom, which is said to be an extremely difficult stunt to pull off. But to Dash's experience of performing it once before, she hopes to succeed again, win, and hang out with the Wonderbolts as a winning prize of the competition. But surprise, surprise, Dash is having trouble practicing her stunt until at the very end. And while she's prepping up and struggling, every step of the way she gets more nervous than ever by all the ordeals that weigh over her shoulders. Under Dash's hooves, she goes through a lot of pressure of what either consequences or benefits will stand out more based on her performance. Aside from reaching close to hanging out with the Wonderbolts, she fears that the consequences of her loss will be much greater than the odds. A little over-exaggerative, as a matter of fact.
Just because you failed the Sonic Rainboom 100,000 times in practice doesn't mean you won't be able to do it in front of an entire stadium full of impatient, super critical sports fan ponies.
What do I do? Every pony's gonna see me fail! The Wonderbolts will never let a loser like me join! Princess Celestia will probably banish me to the Everfree Forest! My life is ruined!
It also doesn't help when Rarity attempts to enter the competition due to her precious butterfly wings given by Twilight.
Rarity, we're supposed to be helping Rainbow Dash relax, remember? Put your wings away and stop showing off.
Oh, how can you ask me to put away perfection?
In the explanation behind her side of the episode, the wings were given as a test run so that the main six can enter Cloudsdale and accompany Dash, since only Pegasi are able to walk in the clouds. Since the spell was considered too powerful to work with, Twilight instead finds a cloud walking spell to make it up. Why didn't she thought about using that in the first place, I have no idea. Unfortunately, Rarity gets completely carried away, showing off her wings and then motivated to enter the competition, overshadowing all possibilities of Dash's success. What also puts her in the line of self-doubt are a set of bullies she's known in the past who antagonize her, bringing her guard down. So with all this in mind, and disregarding her ego, I felt more sympathy for her than I had imagined in this episode. Getting back to Rarity, the major appreciation that I have with her in this episode is how natural her flaws are played out. As Brony Chronicles pointed out, her sense of generosity is what encourages the main six to accompany Dash for her stage fright at the beginning. But on the contrary, seeing that her butterfly wings get the best out of her, her sense of passion and art get in the way. Rarity is an overall resemblance of art, and it can be a major issue to oneself. Given that it almost cost her life, it's made her so resentful that it shows her side of the plot created in depth without the necessity of making her an antagonist. Without the subplot, there wouldn't have been as grand of a climax when Dash performs her Rainboom. She saves Rarity and the Wonderbolts, brought out by all the build-up and tension as well as her fear. So while the ending is very predictable, out of what's happened beforehand and to the overall execution, this episode pays off very well. Alas though, nothing ever is perfect. The only downside unfortunately points out to Princess Celestia. She was present during the competition, but as Rarity's life is in danger, Celestia does nothing but watch. She doesn't try to help her, nor do her royal guards. That bothers me because for a long time, I've wanted to see Celestia be more active so that I can appreciate her more. She was active on some occasions, but for the most part she just stood in the background, continuing to be a parental figure at times. There's been a lot of gripe in the past about Celestia, and she wasn't shown to be as supportive due to her lack of screen time, especially with the Ticketmaster bringing out only 2 tickets instead of 6. The exception I'm able to think of though is that maybe she was secretly guided in the main 6 and what she sets up. But in this situation, it almost seems like she just doesn't care. I want to like Celestia, and on some occasions I do, but there's a lack of proactivity she has as shown in this episode. Not all the time though. If there was any screen time that would have displayed her concerns, I may have forgiven the scene just a little bit more. Now thankfully, it doesn't deteriorate the values in what the script offers. It sticks with what it needs to stick with, it emphasizes the morals very well, and as time goes on, I appreciate it more and more. In fact, in the later episodes, we get continuity nods as Dash masters the Rainboom technique, and exploited on her skill. In a later episode, the Mare Chronicles, all the backstories of the main 6 are connected with Dash's Rainboom, which is stated back in this episode she once performed the stunt.
Do you realize what this means? All of us had a special connection before we even met.
We've been BFFs forever and we didn't even know it.
Come here, y'all.
I love you guys.
This is a well-crafted sense of continuity in which M.A. Larson did. This is a major thing Larson was praised for, which is also why it pained me watching how he wrote Fluttershy in Magic Duel. But that's beyond the point. The episode was simply amazing, and it's simply what I find to be one of the finest in the show. If there's anyone new to the series or the fandom, this is simply a good start, especially since it's a season 1 episode. Until next time, this is GoldenFox, and I'll catch you all later. When I opened myself up to requested reviews, It's About Time was what I didn't think too much about. Both this and Family Appreciation Day were 2 of the most forgettable episodes for me throughout Season 2. Now, that's not to say that it was bad, but it was pretty average. It's a filler episode to be sure, but it did have a good sense of entertainment that stood its grounds. This episode starts off with Twilight pacing around back and forth during the library in the middle of the night. She freaks out over how unorganized her overlong schedule has become. She is unsure of what to settle with first, so she spends all night until morning finishing her plans. A future Twilight suddenly appears looking all torn up with an eye patch, leaving an impression that something disastrous may have happened. She tries to warn her about the future outcome that startles the present Twilight, but unfortunately, with little time to spare and the extreme curiosity about time travel letting the current Twilight ramble on, the future self vanishes and then the warning is never given to her. Twilight gets worked up about this, trying to figure out what it is, so she goes throughout Ponyville telling everyone about this unknown warning.
My future self tried to warn me about a horrible disaster that's gonna occur sometime before next Tuesday morning.
What kind of disaster?
I don't know. I got sucked back into the future before I could explain.
Whatever should we do, Twilight? How do we stop the disaster if we don't know what it is?
We'll just have to work together to make sure we're safe.
So they scan through the entire town, speculating any potentially oncoming disasters. Still, Twilight is concerned, and she periodically gets herself injured and mishap to eventually resembling of what future Twilight looks like.
The eye patch. Another sign. Nearly all the signs have come true. If Tuesday's tomorrow and the disaster happens by Tuesday morning, then there's only one solution. Stop time.
It's from this point on I was able to tell that nothing disastrous was going to happen. I already knew that everything Twilight was all worked up about was going to result into a false alarm and a time loop. As the episode ends, Twilight uses a spell she learned from the scrolls Pinkie found, which allows her to travel in the past to warn herself and not get all worked up to begin with. But alas, this results in finishing the time loop. It was predictable as it could get. But on the contrary, while I already debated what the outcome was, the entire scenario was cleverly put together, and just overall enjoyable, watching all the dysfunctional madness get the best out of Twilight. Many seem to have complained that the episode could have been something more extravagant and possibly be a Doctor Who's episode, or have an epic event, but that completely misses the point of its moral. The message is that you shouldn't worry about the future and deal with what you have, but at the same time be mindful of what you're doing presently, since every action has a consequence. This was shortly demonstrated by Spike as his attempts throughout the episode was indulging ice cream, which eventually got himself a stomachache at the end. The humor in this episode was legit, though I wouldn't say I completely laughed my ass off. The only exception was when Pinkie Pie had a sense of enjoyment through panicking.
Any pony else want to panic with me? No?
I'm not going to lie, watching her asking for someone to panic with her just felt so random that I couldn't help but laugh. It simply toyed and satirized the psychology of public panics whenever terror was at hand. As a matter of fact, Pinkie Pie, taking a major role in this episode with Twilight, remained silly but was also aware of many actions. Other episodes have unfortunately misused her in the sense of making her brainless. Thankfully, that wasn't the case here, because when she was present, some of her silliness and even to her own sense of awareness was supportive to Twilight throughout. The connections between the two fascinated me, having a huge contrast from Twilight, who was logical and yet loony, and Pinkie Pie was simple and silly, yet wise. It was a bit of a switcheroo, which was a nice little twist. A few rare appearances were also a pleasure to see, one of which was Cerberus, who showed up in Ponyville. With this and Iron Will as a Minotaur, it's nice to see that some traits from Greek mythology help expand the universe of the show. Other times I've seen other creatures who are mostly Persian or medieval mythos. We also get a mention of Starswirl the Bearded, who was mentioned in multiple episodes that hinted something to us until its revealance was shown in the Season 3 finale. MacGuffins for the win! If there's any issue I had, Pinkie hid a few items in the show, such as balls in trees or eye patches in different buildings in case of emergencies. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's just lazy writing for sheer plot convenience. How in all hell do balls in trees and patches in buildings bear any emergency precautions? The better question is, why would you store an eye patch in a fireplace where filth and dirt can get in your eye and claim it to be an emergency precaution? I'm surprised Twilight didn't get pink eye after this. I know it's just nitpicking, but Larson, you're better than that. That's really as much as I can say. This probably isn't one of my best reviews that I've written, but to be completely fair, I don't think the plot of Time Loops could have been done any better than what we were given. It isn't a bad episode by any means, as I mentioned before, but it already started with a thin plot. But that managed to exploit upon itself through its moral, and that's a strong consideration. Whenever I watch the episode more, there is something that I can take from it, and that's pretty challenging to pull off. But in the end, aside from the moral it was establishing, it's still forgettable to me. And the biggest thing that I remember was the connections of Twilight and Pinkie Pie and its overall humor that's played out. Until next time, this is GoldenFox, and thank you all for listening. So here we are, the mysterious Mare duel, said to be one of the worst episodes, if not the worst episode in the entire series. Many negative reviews were thrown in, and several people on Skype spoke to me, ranted about this episode back to back. And of course, after opening myself up to reviewing episodes by request, this is no surprise at all. But despite all the complaints and gripes and moans that I heard of, the truth was, I just didn't care how bad this episode was. Many episodes prior to me felt very exciting to me when watching Season 2, but after watching Mysterious Mare duel, I just thought it was a whatever, and I simply moved on afterwards. But I never expected how negatively receptive this episode has become. However, when looking back on the episode again, yeah, I can understand how cringeworthy it was. But again, several people have fussed to me about this for a long time that the only thing I could do was just go along with it. Anyway, as this episode begins, Dash becomes the savior of a few occurring incidents throughout Ponyville. At first she's surprised by all the reception she gets, but then she becomes so bathed in her ego that she begins to forget what she stood for. Most of the time she goes through making speeches and catchphrases during her rescues, which eventually deteriorates her potential of saving lives. Then what arrives is a costumed vigilante who's later renowned as the Mysterious Mare duel, hence the title. And in an instant, Dash gets completely overshadowed and gets desperately competitive trying to reclaim her level of fame. And it fails in the process. Dash gets dumbfounded when trying to reclaim her fame, like mowing the grass, opening a jar for some pony, and eventually, what we see her do, it gets really fucking stupid. Not to mention the continuity issues of Ponyville's design, adding a cliff, and then there's a clubhouse of Rainbow Dash. Good lord, this episode is a fucking mess. How was it that I was unable to sense any of these problems? I don't have the faintest clue. So what is there that hasn't been said already? The moral at the end of the episode was self-contradicting given that the main six spoke behind Dash's back, making themselves incredibly ruthless. What this episode tries to aim for is the attitude of egotism. This was already betrayed and established much better in Sonic Rainboom. What made the moral of that episode work better is that while Dash had to overcome stage fright, Rarity's obsession with her butterfly wings got the best of her, and she forgot what was more important. Even more so, what happened with Rarity was a side plot to Dash's central conflict. In the Mysterious Mare duel, this was the central moral of the story, and what made it fail so miserably was that everyone has made the same mistake Dash did.
I don't understand. Why? Don't you want me to be a hero?
Of course we want you to be a hero.
But a real hero doesn't brag.
You bragged about yourselves behind Dash's back earlier in the episode. What the fuck makes you guys any better? You could argue that maybe this was done on purpose to reflect on Dash's behavior at the beginning of the episode, but a better solution would be for the main six to talk to her at first, which is a more mature step before taking any further actions. And yet they don't. And if Dash refuses to listen, then dress up as a vigilante to motivate her afterwards, and then you could potentially make a better script. As a matter of fact, I've stated before that Meriwether Williams' writing style demolishes so much potential of what could make a better episode. One was Heartswarming Eve, where instead of a stage act, it could have been driven down the origins of Celestia and Luna during the foundation of Equestria, and thus expand the mythology. Another was with Dragon Quest, which could have explored the heritage of Spike, but instead, she hammered school lessons about bullies in her heads. In the Mysterious Mare duel, what could have made this a more intriguing episode was instead of just having one vigilante, there could have been multiple vigilantes of the main six with authentic designs. Much like Luna Eclipse, this could have been a much more creative episode at this point given all the costumes that are designed. I can only guess that the Power Pony scene from the Season 4 animatics at Comic-Con is making up for that potential. Let it be said, it was just another dud in the line of successful releases, and this happens a lot more often than what most people think. Same thing can be said with Feeling Pinkie Keen. I understand the hate, and I don't blame them, but again, I just didn't care. And alas, there's an episode of Season 2 that grinded my gears, if not more than what this episode did to me. Until then, I'll catch you all later. I'm not surprised at all that Feeling Pinkie Keen was a requested episode for me to talk about. Much like the Mysterious Mare duel, this episode was the black sheep of Season 1. However, unlike Mare duel, which had a poorly written script and a self-contradicting message at the very end, Keen was an episode that unintentionally arose a lot of controversy. It was taken so heavily offensive in terms of its moral and how much it was practically misunderstood. The reception out of this message went so sour that even Lauren Faust feared talking about it. As a matter of fact, I'm in fear of talking about this episode due to its insensitivities I might bring up. However, I do believe that there is a redeemable way that could have made up for its faults if the execution and dynamic was played out correctly. What follows here is that Pinkie has a sense of oncoming predictions through bodily functions, such as a twitchy tail indicating that something is going to fall from the sky.
So basically, it works like this. I get different little niggly feelings and they mean different things. Like when my back gets itchy, it means it's my lucky day. And when my knee gets pinchy, that means something scary is about to happen.
Throughout the rest of the episode, Twilight doesn't find it to be true, and thus she analyzes her. She endlessly tries to contradict Pinkie's sensing abilities with any factual evidence she can get her hooves on. However, every step of the way, Twilight's proven wrong out of all the predictions Pinkie's estimated, and it ends with a slapstick putting Twilight in the states of humiliation. That's as little the plot offers, and most of it is just played for laughs. What we get in this episode is a conflict between suspicion against science and a Roadrunner-esque comedy. Pinkie Pie plays the protagonist on the side of suspicion, and Twilight's the antagonist representing science. This is one of the first major problems. Let it be said that there are stories that always involve conflict, and there's always one side to root for. But if you take that concept to compare real-life matters with it, you're going to be facing extreme delicacy. And I'm not just talking about what we have in this episode, but generally speaking. A prime example was with environmental cartoons back in the 90s, specifically Ferngully and Once Upon a Forest. What they shared in common was how much we needed to respect our motherly planet. But because of how one-sided it was, it forgot to tell kids that trees are a natural resource for our shelter and living environments, ranging from towns and neighborhoods to major cities and utopias. A more properly balanced moral on that matter was with Princess Mononoke, which addressed both sides equally. Getting back to Feeling Pinkie Keen, a better script would have involved a more balanced conflict. Perhaps Pinkie would be curious about her unusual abilities, like how she got it, such as maybe a family trait in her history and it was passed on to her, or if she was uncertain or not, it would always work throughout her life. Twilight can investigate with the use of science alongside it instead of against it. But instead of making that direction, Pinkie just enforces Twilight on a one-sided message.
You don't believe because you don't understand.
And that's when the religious aspect is brought up and brings the moral completely out of context. Some viewers believe that this episode tried to enforce that religion is something you have to choose to believe in. The actual moral is that it's important to have an open mind. And if you can't understand the answers, you just have to choose to believe it.
I don't see how it does, but it just does. Just because I don't understand doesn't mean it's not true.
Okay, let's put aside the religious point and get back to the suspicion. While the virtues of having an open mind can be conceivably true, that isn't always the answer to everyone's argument. Answers don't always come to you. You have to go to them and work for it. This is also known as being proactive. Add this message and the religious side that viewers have perceived it towards, and you have one hell of a crisis on your hands. But of course, it goes without talking about the writer of this episode, Dave Polsky. Now, to get this out of the way, Dave's been pretty infamous for the episodes he's written, them being this, Over a Barrel, and Keep Calm and Flutter On, all of which have held delicate and sensitive premises. The strength of Dave's writing style is his use of humor. As a matter of fact, Too Many Pinkie Pies was a perfect example for him to write on, given how simple the episode was written out and what humor is put in support of the story. It maintained its audience throughout a simple storyline. A lot of jokes he's made, including this one, have been presented very well. Getting back to feeling Pinkie keen, I did get good laughs such as Twilight's fiery rage at the end and the slapstick torment on the Hydra, plus Gummy's first appearance that made Twilight jump out of the bathtub. But the humor in this episode unfortunately cost the story's coherence and improper representation that horrifically affected the message. That, and I didn't like how tormenting the episode was with Twilight. Again, this episode was too one-sided. In the overall consensus, I personally think that other writers can tackle on delicate morals much better than what Polsky can. Now, just to be perfectly clear, this isn't a guarantee on how this episode could have been written any better. It's at the very least from my point of view on how I would have adjusted the execution and managed its repercussions. Everyone has different viewpoints, especially how the subject can be compared with other ones that are sensitive. On the plus side, the use of Pinkie's senses have been put to use from time to time, but with a more naturality in support of the story. But I'll only stop there since I don't want to open up any more fresh can of worms. I'll end it on this note. Let a lesson be learned that realistic topics should be handled more delicately, and what precautions should be taken in advance. Mistakes are going to happen. There will always be a piece that it won't live up to, and this episode has proven that. Until next time, I'm GoldenFox, and I'm going to be taking cover since this video is going to start a flame war.